Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Mirjana Pantic. This is MCA 115 News Reporting, and today's lecture is about the inverted pyramid format, quotations, and attributions. So I'm going to share my screen with you and start the presentation. What is the inverted pyramid? Maybe you've heard of this format before, or maybe this is the first time that you're getting acquainted with this term. The inverted pyramid is the most common structure for writing a news story. How does it look like and how does it start? It starts with the story lead. So, of course, every story has a headline, but the inverted pyramid, aside from the headline, the first thing you will see is the lead of the story that we talked about in the previous lecture. So, the lead of the story is the first paragraph of the story. And then the inverted pyramid continues with the second paragraph, third paragraph, fourth paragraph. So the rest of the story is what we call the body of the inverted pyramid. How do you end a story that utilizes this journalistic format? You basically end it with no conclusion. The last paragraph in your story is the least relevant detail. It is still important. Like, just because it is at the end of the story doesn't mean that it's not important, because everything that you find relevant needs to be in your story. It is just not as important as those details that you have in the first or second or third paragraph. It's just so you basically end the story with the least important information. Let's see how that looks like. So the inverted pyramid, the most important information is first, or the story lead, what happened, when, where, why, why and how. So then the second paragraph is the next important information. And then third paragraph, next most important information. And until you get to the least important information, and that is the end of your story. Again, no conclusion. You end the story with the least important information. How do paragraphs in the inverted pyramid look like? As I mentioned, you start with the lead. It is the first paragraph, and it represents the focal point of the news story. Second paragraph usually takes some aspects of the lead and expand them with additional information. It is equally difficult to write. So what do we usually have in the second paragraph? You can have an explanation of the story, why something happened. Or in case you're using the delayed identification lead, you might add additional details about the person mentioned in the first lead. You might add additional details in the second paragraph of the story. And then third paragraph includes other important information. Quite often, this is where you will have quotes. So let's say if President Donald Trump announced something, and then in the second paragraph, you might say why, like provide some context, like why he announced what he announced. It is likely that in the third paragraph, you will simply use a quotation that you obtained at the press conference that President Trump held. And then the body adds detail to information that has been introduced in the lead and in the first, second, two or three paragraphs. So you have this most important information, first, second, and third paragraph, and then there's the body of the inverted pyramid. So let's take a look at some examples. And I can't actually stop talking about the story leads. Why? Because we talked about it before. Leads are the most difficult to write. They're also the most important because we need to make sure that based on what we have to offer, our readers are actually interested in reading the story that we created. So let's take a look at some of the examples of the lead. The New Year's Eve ball dropped in a soggy Times Square where thousands of revelers stuck it out in heavy rain to celebrate the start of 2025 in New York City. So this is like a report from the New Year's Eve, and other details that you will have in that report that you're likely to have is what was the program like, how many people attended, how long was, how did they react to the rain, and blah, blah, blah. So you basically add other details from from the New Year's Eve. And then another example of the lead, this is also from a story published on January 1st, Associated Press story. Israeli strikes killed at least 12 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, mostly women and children, officials said Wednesday, as the nearly 15-month war ground on into the new year. We had a very bad January 1st because multiple really tragic events happened in the US and other countries across the globe. And then there's one more example of the lead. For this story covers politics in the Balkans. Zagreb, Croatia. Croatia's incumbent president, Zoran Milanovic, won most of the votes in the first round of a presidential election on Sunday, but must face a runoff against a ruling party candidate to secure another 5-year term. Then what you would expect in the second paragraph of the story is an explanation of the presidential election process in Croatia, also who is another person that he's going to compete with in the runoff, and so on. So you just basically have other important details of this story. Now, I just wanted to reflect on the lead because I think that I will be providing examples of the lead all the time, as that is the most important piece in these puzzles. It's the most difficult and the most important piece of the story to write. Now, let's take a look at this example. I also wanted to provide you an example of like a portion of the story, like how does a typical inverted pyramid story look like. There's a lead, second paragraph, third paragraph, and then the body of the story. So you can find more information, and you can just search this story by typing in the headline in Google, and the story has been published by the BBC. So Lively and Baldoni both filed new lawsuits in Harassment Row. This is one of the at the moment when I'm like recording this lecture, this is really one of the burning issues in entertainment industry. And I thought it would be like an interesting example for you. So let's take a look at it. Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni have filed competing lawsuits that ramp up a battle over allegations of what happened in the set of their film, It Ends With Us. As you can see from the lead of the story, they didn't say Blake Lively filed the story, and then in the second paragraph, Justin Baldoni filed the lawsuit as well. But they actually said that both these actors filed competing lawsuits. And then the next paragraph is providing more details about each lawsuit. So they started with Blake Lively because I assume this is because she was the first one to file a lawsuit. So they started with her. Lively filed a lawsuit in New York against the actor and his publicity team on Tuesday, alleging sexual harassment on the set of the film and a scheme to destroy her reputation. So they started with Blake Lively, explained that portion of the story, and you can't fit it all into one paragraph. So the next paragraph now explains what Baldoni did. And remember, when we talk about paragraphs and how we organize them and why they have only one sentence, so it is because we want to, with each shift in topic, we want to start a new paragraph. So let's say the second paragraph is reserved for Blake Lively. Now we're shifting topic, and we want to also reflect on Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. So it's now a shift in topic, and now we're saying Baldoni, meanwhile, has filed a lawsuit against the New York Times, which first reported Lively's legal complaint accusing journalists of working with the actress to damage his reputation and ignoring evidence which contradicted her claims. So there's more explanation about why he filed the lawsuit. So in the first paragraph, you're not going to mention all the reasons both of them filed the lawsuit, but you're just saying that one filed the lawsuit against the team and another that like both of them filed lawsuits. And then in the first paragraph, we started with Lively because she was the first one to file a lawsuit, and then this was Baldoni's response to that. And then the body of the story starts. It adds more details to the story. So these are the most important actors in the story. I mean, not the most important actors in Hollywood, but the most important actors in the story, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. So we cover that portion, and then the body of the inverted pyramid provides more detail. The newspaper has denied his allegation and said the original story was meticulously and responsibly reported. This is it, even though it looks like it's in a chronological order, it's not about that. It's really about us. It is important for us to understand how the story develops. So that's why they started with Lively, then Baldoni's response to that, and then because Baldoni actually decided to file a lawsuit against the New York Times, then we also need the reaction from the New York Times to this lawsuit. So this is basically how the inverted pyramid story looks like. And if you Google this story, you will find more detail, and you will find exactly like how the body of the news story looks like. Another interesting story I found on January 1st, also on BBC website. Elon Musk changes his name to Cactus Maximus on X. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has sparked speculation after changing his name on his social media platform X to Cactus Maximus. The tech mogul and close confidant of US President-elect Donald Trump offered no immediate explanation for the name of his name profile of his new profile image, which depicts the character Pepe the Frog, a meme that has been used by far-right groups. The move has sent ripples through the cryptocurrency world, sending the value of a meme coin, a digital currency inspired by internet memes that shares the same name, skyrocketing. In the past, Mr. Musk has influenced crypto prices with his social media commentary, but it was not immediately clear if he had any involvement in this particular meme coin. So again, you can go and find more details about this story, but it's also another example of the inverted pyramid story. Like the next day when I checked, like his name was Elon Musk again on Twitter or on platform X. But you can see how the story looks like. So basically, oh, this is what happened. So he changed his name on Twitter. It is interesting because he's the richest person in the world. He's also the owner of this platform. It's kind of intriguing, but why did he do that? And then in the second and third paragraph, they actually provided the explanation. They also provided more details, not only that he started using this name, but he also added a new profile image, which depicts the character Pepe the Frog, a meme that has been used by far-right groups. So because they wanted to figure out whether this has something to do with cryptocurrency or whether this has something to do with far-right groups. So they also provided a paragraph, the BBC provided a paragraph where they connected this name to cryptocurrency world. So you see, basically in the inverted pyramid, in the lead of the story, you need to go with the most important information, and then it is expected of you to provide more important detail, also important details in the second and third paragraph, and then the remaining background information goes into the body of the inverted pyramid. You will end it with the least important information. Now, the body of the story contains the information a reporter believes readers need to know, as I mentioned, just because that last paragraph is your last paragraph, it doesn't mean that the information in that paragraph is irrelevant. No, it means that it's very relevant because you go and you're exposed to all this information, but you select which information you want to use in your story. Not everything is important, so you're going to ditch a lot. But then the last paragraph is actually what you find if you look at all the information that you have to write a story, what you find the least relevant from the amount of information that you found to be relevant for your story, what you find the least relevant will actually be at the end of your story. Now, what kind of this information can be presented in several styles? So you're most likely to encounter new stories that utilize the inverted pyramid style. I'm also going to introduce you to several other styles aside from inverted pyramid. It is hourglass, focus, and narrative. So I'm gonna just explain briefly each of these styles that you can also find in your stories, and they do make sense. But again, the inverted pyramid style is the most common. So the hourglass style, this type of story is composed of three parts. There is an inverted pyramid top that summarizes the most relevant information. Then there's a turn paragraph and a narrative. You can see examples in the textbook, but basically in some cases, you might provide like, let's say, information from an event in the form of the inverted pyramid. But then, let's say you want to write about bank robbery. And then you start with the inverted pyramid. This is what happened. This is how much money was taken out of the bank. This is what the police officer had to say. So you basically provide all the important information about the story. And then the third paragraph could be you decide to or explain everything that happened from the beginning to the end and in a chronological order. So that's the turn, and then the story takes a different turn and you kind of provide all the details about what happened. But in the first several paragraphs that look like the inverted pyramid, you're basically summarizing the event, tell us the key points of the event, of that event, and then you go the other way and you simply provide information in a chronological order about what happened, like at what time, blah, blah, blah. So you provide all other details. So aside from that, the focus style has, it's a type of story that has four parts. There's the lead, which may run 3 or more paragraphs. So it's similar to the alternative lead. A nut graph, it can be 2 or 3 paragraphs, and a nut graph is very important because a nut graph states the central point of the story. So this is where you learn what is the most important about the story. The body develops the central point in detail. So you point at what happened, like in the case of these two lawsuits that Blake Lively and Justin, the two of them filed. And then after that, you kind of go into more details about that central point. The style begins with the lead that focuses on a specific individual situation and anecdote and uses to illustrate a larger problem. And I forgot to mention this, there is a final part of a story that utilizes the focus style, and it's called a kicker. This brings the story to a conclusion. So there is like a form of conclusion in those stories that utilize the focus style. In the narrative style, it has two components, a story and a storyteller. What does it mean? A storyteller writes as a playwright or novelist would. The storyteller depicts people interacting with other people and within their surroundings. So the descriptive part is emphasized in the narrative approach, and the narrative approach allows reporters to be creative in their writing. So also see examples in the textbook because I'm not going to go in detail about these three styles in this lecture, as my focus is the inverted pyramid. which is the most common style, but we can talk more about these three styles in class. What are other important elements of news writing that you should be aware of? Quotes and attributions. So we can't just state something in, let's say, the first paragraph of our news story without attributing that information to story. If we say crime rates in New York have decreased, how do you know that? So I, as a reader, I'm expecting you to tell me in that first paragraph, how do you know that? Who told you that crime rates in New York City have dropped? So I need to know that from you, right? So keep that in mind as you write your news story. So always attribute information to a source. Of course, if you are the one writing about what happened from what you see, you're not going to say, I saw this or I saw that, but you're going to simply write it in a way there were three people involved in this car crash because like, or I'm trying to think of a better example, or you can say, there was a sign um, when we arrive at this concert or conference saying this or that. So basically, you're suggesting to so you're not going to say, I saw a sign, but there was a sign, because you're not using the first person in your news story. But the thing is that when you explain, you make it clear that you were there, present in the event, that you saw a sign displaying this or that. Now, let's go back to quotes and attributions. Quoting, sometimes we just say a direct quotation. It means using the exact words that the source used. A direct quote uses quotation marks around the words of the source and then gives the name of the source. My opponent is distorting my record, Bradley said. Let's talk about this sentence. AP style, or Associated Press style, that we use in journalism, when they, according to their rules, when you write a quotation and attribute it, you need to place a period before quotation marks, before close quotation marks. So just remember that. Now, when do you use direct quotations? When you use direct quotations, you need to quote exactly what the person said. So you cannot make up words, remove things, and remove words, and or so on. You need to have a direct quotation. You need to use the words exactly the way your interviewee or a person who delivered a speech at the press conference or at the convention or whatever, you need to write word by word what they said. Sometimes we use a paraphrase. What does it mean? So you're gonna look at what the person you're quoting said, but you're not gonna quote them directly. You are going to paraphrase them instead. Why would you do that? Let's take a look at the example first, and then I will explain. A paraphrase is when you change the words of a direct quotation, or when you put what the speaker has said in your own words. This is sometimes called an indirect quotation. Bradley said the vice president was distorting his record. I'll give you some other examples where you're going to use it. I really like direct quotations, especially when they use strong words, when they're powerful, when they're sending a clear message. When I, as a reader, if I see this quotation in a newspaper or in an online magazine, I'm going to say, wow, it's going to be clear to me, and it's going to be powerful. So I'm going to understand exactly what the person meant based on what they said. Sometimes people tend to be confusing. They tend to use too many words, or maybe they use complicated words. So if that happens, I would rather, as a journalist, paraphrase them using my own words. So, you will deal with a lot of economic experts or politicians who use certain words that are not common and they're not common, or that ordinary people might not be able to understand, or they just sometimes their sentences sound confusing. To avoid that confusion, the best thing to do is just summarize using your own words what they wanted to say. If you just copy and paste what they said, if you use it verbatim, like verbatim, if you use it that way, just remember you might really confuse your readers. So you don't want to do that. Instead, just paraphrase them. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to tell you, you know how I like to surprise you with my exercises? Well, the exercise that I prepare for you for this week is already in discussion. And if you open discussion, you will find it under week 5. It's called The Body of a New Story. So just go there, see my instructions, and complete that exercise before we meet in class. Thank you. I just want to make sure that you're watching my video lectures. Now, let's continue. Types of quotations. Direct quotations. So let's see how, one more time. So I already provided you an example of a direct quotation, but I'm going to do it one more time. So what does this direct quotation say? um, my personal apology is the first step of making things right after many plans change, Ryan Green said. I just saw something that wasn't that I didn't see originally when I decided to add this example to the PowerPoint. So this is the direct quotation, and you leave it that way. What if you were to change it? I'm 100% sure that many of you would remove this word personal from the quotation. And it makes perfect sense, because why would you say my personal apology? My apology. So we talked so many times about redundant words, and this is a great example of how that person used redundant words, but it's just one word. So we will just ignore it and we'll say, okay, because it is so important to use this quote in our story, but we also cannot change anything that the person said. We need to cite them word by word, quote them word by word. Then we're going to leave it this way. My personal apology is the first step of making things right after many plans change, Ryan Green said. Now, how is an indirect quotation going to look like? So basically, you use the words that the person used, but you don't need to put them in a direct quote, or maybe you will change the tense used and so on. So let's take a look at this example. Patrick Keane, a traveler who exclaimed with joy upon being reunited was with his lost luggage, said he had not had his belongings in a week. And for a sentence like this, you don't really need a direct quotation, but anyway, if you just want to quote that person indirectly, you don't use any quotation marks, anything like that. You just basically paraphrase them a little. Oh, he said this, and so on. When it comes to partial quotations, Southwest CEO Bob Jordan has previously said the company hoped to be back on track before next week. The reason they used this partial quotation is because this is exactly what he said. Back on track before next week means that they quoted this portion of the sentence directly. So all of these quotations are legit. You can use them. You can use direct quotations. You can use indirect quotations. You can use partial quotations. It really depends on so many things. Like in some cases, direct quotations are so good and powerful, and you want to use them that way. In some other cases, it's better just to paraphrase people because they use complicated words or they said so many things that you can just sum up in one sentence. In case of indirect quotation, you want to say what they said, but maybe you want to change the tense or something like that, and then you simply go this way instead. Or there are things that you want to quote directly, but not the full sentence. So you just take like a portion of the sentence that you think is relevant to quote directly, and you call that, and you use that in a sentence as a partial quotation. Now, let's take a look at attributions. As I mentioned, it is really important to have them in your story. The more you exercise this, the healthier you are, research shows. So this is, you need to make sure that you're attributing this information, or let's say, walking 5 times a week will improve your health according to a new study by this university, and so on. So it's, you can't just say walking 5 times a week will improve your health because you're not an expert. You're just a journalist who is actually reporting on what experts are saying. So you need to, your job, unless you're an opinion journalist, and we're going to discuss that as well. Your job is to provide information and then to tell your readers, viewers, listeners how you know what you know. So, who is the source of your information? Who told you that? Anyway, um, I really love journalism, as you say, and as you know, and I really like talking about these things. I used to report from multiple events a day, sometimes 2, 3 events a day, and these things are crucial. Believe me, like direct quotations are so important for your reports. They make them credible, they make them interesting, engaging, they make your reports livelier, and that's why they're important. But also, you want to make sure that your readers understand how credible you are as a journalist. So you're not just saying things, but you're actually you were there collecting information, and then that information that you collected, you're attributing that information to your sources. All major information should be attributed to some source. Attribution gives credibility to the story. Let's take a look at these examples. As I mentioned, January 1st was not a nice day. When I woke up and saw what happened in New Orleans, I was so devastated. And then I learned also about another event, another tragic event that happened in Montenegro and my country, Serbia. We used to actually, um, Serbia and Montenegro were republics of former Yugoslavia. So we share a lot of history. We speak the same language. So I was equally devastated by seeing what happened in Montenegro on January 1st. Let's take a look at this news story. At least 10 people, including 2 children, were killed and 4 others were seriously wounded on Wednesday in a shooting rampage that followed a bar brawl in a western Montenegrin city, officials said. So, who is this information attributed to? Officials. So it's just officials in the lead of the story, and then it is expected in the second or third paragraph of the story to name if this information came from a police officer or some other official. Then we're gonna have their name in the second paragraph of the story. But this is just important to emphasize because if officials said that, then it means the information is accurate because they wouldn't be playing with the number of victims, especially in this case, when 2 victims are children. Another sad event from January 1st. Again, it was a sad day across the globe. 20 people are missing after falling into the sea from a tilting boat after it started to take in water in rough seas about 20 miles off the coast in Libya, according to survivors. So this information, like in the lead of the story, The Guardian basically stressed that they collected this information from the survivors, which means that you're expected in the rest of the story, the inverted pyramid story, to learn more about what those who witnessed this event had to say about it. And then the next example related to attributions in news stories is violence, intimidation, disinformation, and threats to disobey lawful court rulings are putting the United States revert principles of judicial independence in jeopardy. The Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, has warned. So, who did we attribute this information to? Look at it again. Who is the source? So, the source is we learned this from the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts. But as you see in all of these cases, they had the key information presented in the story lead attributed to a source. So the lead of the story had attribution. So in almost all cases, not all cases, but in the majority of cases, you will find attribution in the lead of the story. What is it that that you should attribute? So there are certain things that are common knowledge, so we don't need to attribute it to science. The earth is round. Like we don't need to attribute that information, but facts that are not common knowledge need to be attributed to a source. Also, make sure to attribute statements about controversial issues, statements of opinions, and I need to also emphasize one more thing about opinions. If you are seeking an opinion, if that opinion comes from an anonymous source, I would strongly discourage you to use it in your story, because if you're seeking somebody's opinion, it should be a source that is known to us, not an anonymous source. What you're looking from anonymous sources is some information that is really important, that is relevant, that they provided evidence for, that they provided documents that show that what they're saying is true. And to protect them, you want to make sure that they are anonymous in your report. But when it comes to opinion, they need to be assigned to the individual who shared that with you. Also, you need to attribute all direct and indirect quotations. And I'm also going to add, you need to also attribute partial quotations. All the quotations simply need to be attributed to a source. Now, let's go over this lecture and then we'll do examples in class when we meet in person. Inverted pyramid. So it's a news format that presents information in an order in which the most important information is at the top of the story, followed by the next most important information and next most important information, the body of a new story that ends with the least important information. So in other words, the inverted pyramid story starts with the most important information. It doesn't have a conclusion. Instead of a conclusion, we have the least important information at the end of the story. Aside from the inverted pyramid story, journalists also use other styles. Depending on the story they're working on, that includes hourglass style, focus style, and narrative styles. This is when they write reports, when they write news stories. Quotations are important. They add credibility to our stories. They make the news report more dynamic, more interesting. Attributions are also critical because we want to show that we are a credible journalist who is also transparent, showing to their readers, viewers, or listeners how they know what they know, how they collected that information, who is the person, or what is the document that they derived the information from. So this is critical. All of these things, knowing how to write a good lead, how to create a story that starts with the most important information, ends with the least important information, how to pick an hourglass style when you think it is important to tell my readers what are the most relevant facts related to the story, but I also want to make a turn and give them um, um, a description of what happened in a chronological order, for example. And I'm going to add quotes to make my story more interesting and also to make it livelier. And I'm going to make sure that everything I have in the story is attributed to these sources. So this is what what good reporting is about. So take a look at this lecture and think about a recent event, watch news, like just pay attention to how they select the most relevant information, because the inverted pyramid style is the style that has been used in journalism for a long time, and we will keep using it because what we as audiences want to know about each event is what happened, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, why it happened. So we need to know these things. And this is why the inverted pyramid is, for us, just the perfect format to report on key events and key issues in the society. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I will see you soon. Have a great day.